Zuri was a kind and gentle girl, known for her warm heart and unwavering kindness. She had always lived in the grand estate of her late father, a nobleman who had once been respected and loved by the people. However, after his sudden and mysterious death, everything changed. The once vibrant household turned cold and oppressive under the rule of her stepmother, Lady Malika. Malika had never cared for Zuri, but while her husband was alive, she had hidden her cruelty behind a mask of politeness. With him gone, she no longer had to pretend. The servants, who once treated Zuri as their beloved young mistress, now ignored her out of fear of Malika's wrath. The luxurious meals she once enjoyed were replaced with scraps from the kitchen. The elegant dresses she wore were taken away, leaving her with old, tattered clothes. Malika did not see Zuri as her stepdaughter, but as an inconvenience, a girl who had no place in her world. Zuri was forced to work like a servant in her own home. From dawn until dusk, she scrubbed floors, fetched water, and prepared meals, all under Malika's sharp gaze. If she ever made a mistake, she was punished, sometimes with harsh words, other times with no food. Yet, despite everything, Zuri endured. She found comfort in small moments, like watching the sun set over the garden her mother once loved, or whispering her hopes to the stars. Rumors spread through the village that Lady Malika was not just a cruel woman, but something far more sinister. Some claimed she had used dark magic to take control of Zuri's father's wealth. Others whispered that she had made a deal with the spirits of the night, trading her soul for power. The air around the estate seemed heavy, unnatural, as if an unseen force lingered in the shadows. Zuri often felt watched, as though something lurked just beyond her sight. One evening, Malika called Zuri into the grand hall. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls as Malika's cold eyes studied her. Without a hint of emotion, she told Zuri that she was no longer welcome in the house. There was no argument, no pleading. Zuri knew it would be useless. She was given only the clothes on her back and a small loaf of bread before being pushed out into the night. The doors slammed shut behind her, sealing her fate. The path ahead led only to the dark forest, a place feared by all. The villagers avoided it, speaking of spirits, curses, and creatures that roamed under the moonlight. Zuri stood at the edge, trembling, her heart pounding. She had nowhere else to go. With one last glance at the home that was no longer hers, she stepped forward into the unknown, leaving behind the only life she had ever known. The night air was thick with silence as Zuri stepped into the Nooka Forest. The towering trees stretched high into the sky, their branches twisting unnaturally, as though whispering secrets to one another. The moon cast a pale glow, barely piercing the dense canopy above. Every step she took was hesitant, her heart pounding as the stories she had heard about the forest echoed in her mind. Nooka Forest was known to be cursed. Villagers spoke of people who had wandered in and never returned. Some believed spirits haunted its depths, trapping lost souls forever. Others whispered of creatures that lurked between the trees, waiting for unsuspecting travelers. Zuri shivered at the thought, wrapping her arms around herself as she took another cautious step forward. With no other choice, she pressed on, her bare feet brushing against damp leaves and tangled roots. The deeper she walked, the colder the air became. It was as if the forest itself was watching her, deciding whether to accept or reject her presence. The eerie silence was soon broken by the faint hum of crickets, then the distant rustling of leaves. Then she saw them, tiny golden lights flickering in the darkness. Fireflies. They hovered in the air like small floating lanterns, moving in a rhythmic dance. Zuri hesitated, then followed them, feeling an inexplicable pull toward their soft glow. With each step, the fireflies guided her further into the woods, their golden light illuminating a narrow path. As she walked, something strange began to happen. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above. But it wasn't just the sound of moving branches. There were voices in the wind, Faint whispers curled around her ears, soft yet urgent. Zuri! She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Had she imagined it? The voice had been distant, almost like an echo from another world. She turned, scanning the darkened trees, but nothing was there. Zuri! This time, the whisper was clearer, closer. She spun around, her pulse racing. The fireflies continued to drift ahead, unconcerned, as if nothing had happened. But Zuri knew she wasn't alone. Something was there, watching. Her fingers clenched into fists as she forced herself to move forward. Her steps quickened, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Shadows shifted in the corners of her vision, darting between the trees. She could feel eyes on her, multiple pairs hidden in the darkness. Yet, strangely, nothing attacked. Zuri's instincts screamed at her to run, but she knew she would not make it far. The fireflies were still ahead, glowing like tiny stars in the night. With no better option, she kept following them, her body tense with every step. The whispers continued, rising and falling like a song carried by the wind. The shadows shifted, but remained at a distance. Zuri did not know if they were friend or foe, but one thing was certain. She was not alone in Nooka Forest. Something, or someone, was waiting for her. Zuri's legs trembled with exhaustion as she stumbled through the endless maze of trees. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her stomach twisting with hunger. The glowing fireflies that had guided her this far began to fade, leaving her in near darkness. The whispers had grown faint, blending with the rustling leaves overhead. Ahead of her, a massive silhouette loomed in the shadows, a towering baobab tree, its thick trunk stretching toward the sky like an ancient guardian. Its roots twisted through the earth like the fingers of a sleeping giant, and its broad branches spread out as if cradling the night itself. The sight was strangely comforting, as if the tree had been waiting for her. With the last of her strength, Zuri stumbled forward and collapsed against the rough bark. The world around her blurred as exhaustion pulled her under, her body too weak to resist sleep. She did not know how long she lay there, but when she awoke, she was no longer alone. A soft humming filled the air, a melody both unfamiliar and soothing. Zuri's eyes fluttered open, and she found herself staring into the kind yet piercing gaze of an old woman. Her dark skin was wrinkled with age, and her long silver hair was braided with small beads that glowed faintly in the moonlight. She wore robes of deep green, the fabric blending seamlessly with the forest around her. In her hands, she held a small wooden bowl filled with steaming food. "Eat, child," the woman said, her voice like the rustling of leaves in the wind. Zuri hesitated. She had learned not to trust easily, but hunger gnawed at her insides. The smell of the food was too tempting to resist. She reached out with trembling hands and took a cautious bite. The warm stew melted on her tongue, rich with unfamiliar spices. Strength slowly returned to her limbs. "Who are you?" Zuri asked between bites. The old woman smiled. "I am Mama Jua, the guardian of the trees." Zuri looked around, suddenly aware of how alive the forest felt. The trees swayed gently, though there was no wind. The ground beneath her seemed to pulse with warmth, as if the earth itself was breathing. It did not feel like a cursed place. It felt alive. "This forest is not what the world thinks it is," Mama Jua continued. "They call it cursed, but that is only because they do not understand. It is enchanted, filled with the spirits of those who came before us." Zuri's heart pounded. But the whispers, the eyes in the shadows. Mama Jua chuckled, her eyes twinkling. "The spirits watch over the land. They do not harm those who walk with truth in their hearts. They have been watching you, child, and they have accepted you." A strange warmth spread through Zuri's chest, a feeling she could not explain. She looked down at her hands, and for the first time, she felt something stir beneath her skin, something powerful, something connected to the very essence of the forest. Mama Jua placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You were never meant to be cast out, Zuri. You were meant to find your way here. The baobab tree behind her seemed to hum in agreement, its ancient presence wrapping around her like an embrace. The forest was not her enemy, it was her home. With newfound strength in her limbs, Zuri followed Mama Jua deeper into the heart of Nooka Forest. The towering trees whispered as she passed, their leaves shimmering under the moonlight. There was something different now. Where before the forest had felt eerie and dangerous, it now pulsed with an undeniable energy, as though it recognized her. Mama Jua walked ahead with quiet confidence, her silver braids swaying with each step. You are ready to see what most eyes cannot, she said, her voice both firm and gentle. Zuri frowned. See what? Mama Jua only smiled and gestured forward. Zuri turned her gaze ahead and gasped. Before her stood an enormous palace woven from nature itself. Vines twisted into archways, their leaves forming delicate patterns like lace. Giant flowers, glowing in shades of gold and violet, bloomed along the walls, their petals shifting as though they breathed. Waterfalls cascaded from unseen heights, pooling into crystal-clear basins that reflected the sky like mirrors. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and ancient magic. This was here all along? Zuri whispered in awe. Mama Jua nodded. It is hidden from those who do not belong, but the forest has chosen you, child. Zuri barely had time to process the words before a new presence filled the air, one so powerful that it made her skin tingle. A tall woman stepped forward from within the palace gates. Her dark skin glowed like polished onyx under the soft light of the flowers, and her eyes, a deep emerald green, shimmered with wisdom. She wore robes woven from silver-threaded leaves, and around her head sat a delicate crown of blooming lilies. Mama Jua bowed slightly. Zuri, meet Queen Nia, ruler of the hidden kingdom of the forest. Zuri's breath hitched. She immediately lowered her gaze, unsure of how to act before a queen. But Queen Nia only chuckled softly. There is no need to bow, little one, she said, stepping closer. You are one of us. Zuri hesitated. One of you. The queen studied her, then spoke gently. Your heart recognizes this place, does it not? You feel it in your bones, in your breath. That is because your mother was once part of this kingdom. Zuri's eyes widened. My mother? Queen Nia nodded. She was one of the strongest guardians of the forest, but she left to live among humans, hoping for peace. When she passed, she left a piece of her spirit within you. That is why the forest has called you home. Zuri's heart pounded. She had never known much about her mother. Malika had forbidden anyone from speaking of her. Now, standing here in this magical kingdom, it all made sense. She had always felt different, always felt drawn to the trees, the wind, the whispers in the shadows. But before she could understand her full potential, she had to prove herself. Queen Nia turned, her expression kind but firm. The forest does not give power freely, Zuri. It must be earned. To truly belong, you must face a test, one that will reveal whether you are worthy of the gifts this land offers. Zuri swallowed hard. She had barely escaped Malika, barely survived the journey here. And now, she had one final challenge to overcome. The wind rustled through the glowing vines, carrying a single whispered word. Prepare. Zuri woke at dawn to the sound of birds singing in perfect harmony, their melodies weaving through the air like an ancient song. The palace of vines and flowers glowed softly under the morning light, and the air carried the scent of fresh rain and blooming jasmine. Today marked the beginning of her training, a journey that would determine whether she truly belonged in this hidden kingdom. Queen Nia stood waiting for her in a clearing surrounded by towering trees. Their roots stretched deep into the earth, pulsing with unseen energy. Mama Jua stood beside her, her wise eyes twinkling as she gestured for Zuri to step forward. The first lesson was understanding the life force of the forest. Queen Nia knelt and placed a hand on the ground. Within moments, tiny vines sprouted from the soil, curling toward her fingertips as though greeting an old friend. The forest breathes, just as we do, she explained. It listens. It speaks. You must learn to hear it. Zuri hesitated before mimicking the queen's movements, pressing her palm to the earth. At first, she felt nothing but the coolness of the soil, the rough texture of leaves. But as she closed her eyes and focused, something stirred beneath her skin. A faint pulse, like a heartbeat, thrummed through her fingertips. The ground felt alive. Mama Jua smiled. Good. You are beginning to listen. Next, she was taught how to speak to the creatures of the forest. Birds, foxes, even the great black panthers that prowled the deeper woods. All of them were guardians, watchers of the enchanted realm. At first, Zuri struggled, unable to understand the subtle movements and sounds that made up their language. But Queen Nia guided her, showing her how to observe, how to listen with more than just her ears. One evening, as she sat beneath a great tree, a small squirrel-like creature approached, its eyes bright with curiosity. It chattered softly, and though Zuri could not yet fully understand, she felt its meaning. Trust. She held out her hand, and the creature scurried onto her palm without fear. A connection had been made. She trained in controlling the wind, learning how to move with it rather than against it. At first, it was impossible. Gusts of air swirled chaotically around her, refusing to bend to her will. But patience became her greatest ally. The wind was not meant to be commanded. It was meant to be guided. And when she finally found the rhythm, the air shifted at her call, dancing around her like an invisible veil. Healing with plants became her next challenge. Mama Hua led her deep into the forest, where flowers glowed with soft blue light and leaves shimmered like silver. Every plant has a purpose, she explained, plucking a leaf and crushing it between her fingers. The scent of mint and honey filled the air. Some heal wounds, some cure sickness, but only those who respect the forest can use its gifts. Zuri practiced tirelessly, learning which roots could mend broken skin and which petals could soothe fevers. The more she worked, the more she realized that the forest was not just a place. It was alive, a vast, breathing entity that had been waiting for her all along. One night, as she meditated beneath the great baobab tree, Queen Nia approached with solemn eyes. "It is time for you to know the truth, child," she said softly. Zuri listened as the queen revealed what had been hidden from her all her life. She was the lost princess of the hidden realm, daughter of a guardian who once protected the balance between the magical and human worlds. Her mother had been a powerful healer, but she had chosen to leave the kingdom to live among humans. When she passed, her legacy had been buried, her daughter raised in ignorance of her true heritage. Everything made sense now. The whispers in the wind, the way the forest had accepted her, the connection she felt with the land. It was all part of who she was meant to be, and Malika had known. The realization struck like a bolt of lightning. Her stepmother had never hated her without reason. She had feared her, feared what she could become, feared that one day Zuri would reclaim the power that had been hidden from her. The weight of destiny settled upon her shoulders. She was no longer just the forgotten girl cast into the forest. She was something far greater. As the night deepened, Zuri sat before the great baobab tree, her heart heavy with the truth she had just learned. She was the lost princess of the hidden realm, heir to a power older than time itself. But one question remained unanswered. The darkness that had shadowed her life, the cruelty of Malika, and the reason behind her stepmother's hatred. Mama Jua approached, her silver braids catching the moonlight. She carried a small wooden staff, its tip glowing with a faint green light. "You are ready to know the rest of the truth," she said. Zuri's breath hitched. She had thought she knew her enemy, but as she listened, she realized that Malika's story was far darker than she had ever imagined. Long ago, Malika had been nothing more than a common woman, a human without magic. She had stumbled upon the sacred heart of the forest, the hidden wellspring of power that fed the land's enchantment. Blinded by greed, she had stolen from it, taking what was never meant to be hers. But magic does not bend willingly to thieves. The spirits of the forest had cursed her, stripping her of the ability to ever truly control the stolen power. Instead, the magic twisted inside her, warping her soul, making her desperate and cruel. She could never draw strength from nature as the guardians did. She could only manipulate, corrupt, and destroy. That was why she feared the forest. She knew it had marked her as a traitor. Zuri's fists clenched. Then how did she take over my father's kingdom? Mama Jua's expression darkened. Through deception, she used dark spells to manipulate his mind, bending his will until he could no longer see the truth. He believed she was his loving wife, trusted her, gave her control over the land. She shook her head. But your mother knew what Malika had done. She tried to fight back. Zuri's heart pounded. And she lost. Mama Jua nodded solemnly. Yes, child, your mother was powerful, but Malika was ruthless. She used dark magic to silence her, ensuring that no one would ever learn what she had done. And when your mother was gone, Malika turned her hatred toward you. Everything clicked into place. Malika had despised her, not because she was weak or useless, but because she was a threat. She had feared that one day Zuri would awaken to her true power and undo everything she had built. And the spirits had been waiting. For years, the spirits of the forest have whispered of a prophecy, Mama Jua continued, that when the rightful heir returns, Malika's reign will end. That is why the forest called to you, why it guided you here. You are the key to restoring balance. A shiver ran down Zuri's spine. It was too much to take in. She had spent years believing she was nothing, a forgotten girl, tossed aside by a cruel stepmother. But now she knew she was destined to reclaim what had been stolen. The weight of destiny pressed down on her, but this time she did not shrink beneath it. She embraced it. She looked toward Queen Naya, who had been listening silently. What must I do? The queen stepped forward, placing a hand on Zuri's shoulder. You must return. You must face Malika and reclaim your rightful place. The forest trembled around them, as if awakening in anticipation. The spirits had waited long enough. It was time for Zuri to fulfill the prophecy. A heavy silence settled over the hidden kingdom as the wind carried a scent that did not belong, the acrid sting of burning wood. The leaves of the enchanted trees rustled in distress, their glow dimming as if they could feel the coming destruction. The air, once filled with the songs of birds, now trembled with an unnatural stillness. Then, the first scream of the forest rang out. Zuri's head snapped up. In the distance, thick black smoke coiled into the sky, swallowing the stars. The flames roared to life, devouring the ancient trees, their golden sap bleeding onto the forest floor like tears. She's here, Queen Naya whispered, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. Zuri's heart pounded. Malika had found them. The ground trembled beneath her feet, the pulse of the earth growing weaker as darkness spread through the land. Malika's presence was a poison, seeping into the roots of the trees, infecting the rivers, turning the once thriving kingdom into a battlefield before the fight had even begun. And she did not come alone. Through the thick smoke, shadows emerged, figures draped in tattered cloaks, their hollow eyes glowing with an unnatural green light. Malika's army of shadow warriors, creatures twisted by dark magic, slithered through the burning trees like living nightmares. Their jagged claws scraped against the bark, leaving trails of decay in their wake. A chilling laugh echoed through the chaos, sending a sharp jolt down Zuri's spine. From the flames, Malika stepped forward, draped in a flowing robe of midnight silk, her face untouched by age, yet her eyes ancient and cruel. You thought you could hide from me forever, little one. Malika's voice was like silk woven with venom. This forest was never your sanctuary. It was only a cage waiting to burn. Zuri clenched her fists, heat rising in her veins, not from fear, but from the power awakening within her. The trees whispered frantically, their voices fading as the fire consumed them. The spirits trembled, waiting for her to act. Queen Nia turned to her, eyes fierce. This is your moment, Zuri. The forest has called you here for a reason. You must decide, will you run or will you fight? Zuri swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to escape before the fire swallowed everything. But another voice, a deeper, older voice, rose within her. She was not that helpless girl anymore. She had trained. She had learned. She was the heir of the hidden kingdom. Slowly, she stepped forward, lifting her chin as the wind swirled around her, whispering its ancient secrets. "This is my home," she said, voice steady, "and I will not let you destroy it." Malika's lips curled into a sneer. "Then prepare to burn with it." With a flick of her hand, she sent a surge of black fire hurtling toward Zuri. And at that moment, Zuri made her choice. The fire raged, licking at the sky with greedy flames. But the forest was not ready to die. The wind howled, carrying whispers of the past, voices that had been waiting for this moment. The spirits of the ancestors stirred. Zuri stood at the heart of the battlefield, feet firmly planted in the scorched earth. Her body trembled, but not with fear, with power. Deep within her, the pulse of the land, the breath of the trees, the heartbeat of every creature called to her. She closed her eyes and reached out. A rush of energy surged through her veins, and suddenly, she was not alone. A chorus of voices rose from the depths of the forest, ancestors long gone, warriors who had once walked these lands, guardians who had protected its magic for centuries. Their spirits, golden and glowing, emerged like flickering fireflies from the ancient trees. They surrounded Zuri, whispering their strength into her soul. The forest awakened. The great baobab trees groaned as their roots burst from the ground, forming towering barriers against Malika's army of shadows. Vines slithered like living serpents, wrapping around the shadow warriors, pulling them into the earth. The rivers rose, their waters shimmering with magic, crashing into the flames and snuffing them out. And then came the creatures of the forest. Leopards, with eyes of molten gold, leaped from the trees, their claws tearing through the darkness. Giant eagles swooped down, their wings stirring winds that sent Malika's warriors scattering. Elephants, their tusks glowing with ancient runes, charged through the battlefield, shattering Malika's army like brittle twigs. Zuri's power was the land itself. Through the chaos, Queen Nia appeared before her, holding a weapon unlike any Zuri had ever seen. A staff of light, its surface engraved with swirling patterns of golden fire. "This is the staff of the first guardian," Nia said, her voice steady. "It is the only weapon that can destroy Malika." Zuri took the staff, and the moment her fingers wrapped around it, a brilliant light exploded from its core. The ground trembled, and the spirits hummed in approval. Malika's eyes widened for the first time, not with anger, but with fear. "You think a child can defeat me?" she spat, raising her hands as black tendrils of magic twisted from her fingertips. She unleashed a curse, dark and venomous, aimed straight for Zuri's heart. But the moment it touched Zuri's skin, the magic shattered. Malika screamed as the curse backfired, the shadows recoiling and lashing out at their own mistress. Her stolen power turned against her, rejecting her very existence. Zuri stepped forward, raising the staff high. The spirits of the ancestors stood behind her, their golden eyes unblinking. The trees whispered. The wind held its breath. It was time. With a final, earth-shaking command, Zuri struck the staff into the ground. A blinding wave of light erupted from its tip, surging through the battlefield like wildfire. The shadows let out a collective shriek as they were torn apart, unraveling like mist under the morning sun. Malika, eyes wide with terror, tried to flee, but the light was faster. "No!" she screamed as the golden energy wrapped around her, pulling her toward the abyss from which she had come. "This is not the end. I will return." Her voice was swallowed by the wind, and with one final flash of radiant power, Malika was banished into the shadows forever. The forest exhaled, the trees stilled, the flames died, and Zuri, breathless but unbroken, stood at the center of it all, the rightful guardian of the hidden kingdom. A deep silence settled over the forest. The once raging flames had vanished, replaced by a cool, calming breeze that carried the scent of rain and earth. The trees, once scorched and wounded, began to heal. Leaves unfurling, roots strengthening, flowers blooming anew. The river, once blackened by Malika's corruption, now shimmered with pure, crystal blue water, reflecting the golden light of the spirits. The ancestors stood among the trees, their glowing figures watching over the land they had sworn to protect. Zuri had done what they had waited centuries for. She had restored balance. As she lowered the staff of light, a gentle hum of approval filled the air. The spirits swirled around her, their voices carrying a melody that was both ancient and new. The creatures of the forest, leopards, eagles, and even the great elephants, bowed their heads in respect. Queen Naya stepped forward, her emerald robes billowing like the wind itself. "You have done what no one else could, Zuri," she said, pride shining in her eyes. "You have freed the land from darkness. The spirits have chosen you as the new protector of the hidden kingdom." Zuri felt the weight of those words. This forest, this magic, had become a part of her. She had fought for it, bled for it. She had felt its whispers in her soul. But her heart ached for something more. She thought of her father's land, the kingdom that had suffered under Malika's rule, the people who had lived in fear, who had lost their homes, who had no one to fight for them. The forest had given her strength, but she could not abandon the world beyond it. She turned to Queen Naya, determination in her eyes. "The hidden kingdom is my home," she said, "but so is my father's land. I cannot stay when they still need me." Naya studied her for a long moment, then nodded in understanding. "Then go, Zuri. Rebuild what was lost. But know this, you are forever a guardian of the forest, and it will always answer your call." At her words, the vines parted, revealing a new path, one that led not into the shadows, but toward the rising sun. As Zuri stepped forward, the hidden kingdom, once lost to the world, began to reveal itself once more. The trees no longer concealed it in secrecy. The rivers no longer ran away from the eyes of men. The spirits no longer hid in whispers. The magic of the land was no longer afraid. She turned one last time, gazing at the enchanted world that had made her who she was, and with a heart full of promise, Zuri stepped into the future, not just as a princess, but as a protector. The sun rose over the land, casting golden light upon the fields that had once been barren under Malika's rule. The rivers, now free of corruption, flowed strong and clear, bringing life to the kingdom once more. Peace had returned, not just to the hidden kingdom, but to the world beyond it. Zuri stood at the highest tower of her father's castle, gazing at the people below. Farmers tilled the soil, children played in the streets, and merchants filled the marketplace with laughter and song. Where there had once been fear, there was now hope. She had rebuilt what Malika had tried to destroy. But Zuri was not just a queen of men. She was a guardian of two worlds. She had learned the language of the spirits, the wisdom of the ancestors, and the secrets of the forest. Under her rule, humans and spirits no longer lived in fear of each other. The hidden kingdom and the mortal realm existed in harmony, their fates forever intertwined. Even now, when the wind blew through the trees, she could hear the voices of the ancestors calling her name. One evening, As she walked through the gardens of her palace, Queen Nia appeared, not in body, but as a vision of light and energy. "You have fulfilled your destiny, Zuri," Nia said, her voice as warm as the earth. "The spirits will always walk beside you, and the forest will always be your home." Zuri bowed her head. "I will never forget what I learned among the trees." Nia lifted a hand, and a soft glow surrounded Zuri. "This is my final blessing," she said. "You will always be protected. No darkness shall ever touch you again." The light settled into Zuri's skin, a warmth that would never fade. She felt it in her bones, in her breath, in her very soul. As the vision of Nia faded, the wind whispered a final message. Zuri's name would never be forgotten. Her story would be told for generations, passed down from mother to child, elder to student, spirit to soul. The girl who had once been betrayed had become the savior of two worlds. And so, Zuri ruled with wisdom, kindness, and the strength of the ancestors. She was not just a queen, she was a legend. And the forest, alive and eternal, whispered her name forever.